Welcome to eBible Fellowship's Evening Bible Studies with your host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann. Please visit our website at ebiblefellowship.org. And now with his study in the book of Luke, here's Chris McCann.
Welcome to eBible Fellowship's Bible study in the Gospel of Luke. This is study number 27 in Luke chapter 1. And we'll be reading from verse 20, Luke 1, verse 20. And behold, thou shalt be dumb and not able to speak until the day that these things shall be performed, because thou believest not my words, which shall be fulfilled in their season. And the people waited for Zacharias and marveled that he tarried so long in the temple. And when he came out, he could not speak unto them, and they perceived that he had seen a vision in the temple. For he beckoned unto them and remained speechless. And it came to pass that as soon as the days of his ministration were accomplished, he departed to his own house. And after those days his wife Elizabeth conceived and hid herself 5 months, saying, Thus hath the Lord dealt with me in the days wherein he looked on me to take away my reproach among men. Okay, so last time we looked at the idea of this period of silence that God allowed between himself and Israel, who were his representatives on the earth, around 400 years. Around 400 years, very long period of time. And now in 8 BC, he comes breaking that barrier of the supernatural. So there's no more silence, yet he strikes Zacharias dumb, and he will not be able to speak until not only after John's birth, but until he's circumcised 8 days after his birth on the 8th day. And we can see, when God is silent in that kind of a way, it is an indication he is displeased with the body or the institution that is representing him. And there's much to have been displeased about concerning the nation of Israel. But we also, and I mentioned this at the end of the last study, we also are curious if what happened to Zacharias has anything to do with the New Testament churches and congregations, as Israel is a proverb. The Bible tells us that the Lord uses to point again and again and again to the church, to the New Testament church, and especially since there's reference to 5 months that Elizabeth hides herself. And when we look at that period of time in Genesis 7, Genesis 8, Revelation chapter 9, it has to do with the wrath of God and Judgment Day. And of course, if this is just Israel in view, and God ended his relationship with Israel in the 1st century in 33 AD, well, how does that flow? Going into this statement of the 5 months, it doesn't flow too well at all. But if we look at the temple, as a figure of the corporate church, and God does use the church as a figure, use the temple as a figure of the church. For instance, in 2 Thessalonians, this verse we're very familiar with, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, regarding first the falling away, in verse 3, Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away, or apostasia, first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. The man of sin is Satan. Satan, a devil. And at the time of the end, he's loosed out of the bottomless pit. And you can read in Revelation 20, he's loosed out of his prison. And immediately after reading, he had been bound for 1,000 years, not a literal 1,000 years, a figurative, pointing to the completeness of his binding, which coincided with the church age. And then he was loosed, and right away in the following verses, Revelation 20, verse 7, he's loosed, and the next verses, Gog and Magog rise up and come against the camp of the saints. Camp of the saints are a reference to the church. Gog is Satan, Magog, the Gentiles, or Satan's emissaries that he utilized to assault the churches and congregations of the world and overcome them. And then he takes his seat. To sit in the Bible means to rule. So he took his seat in the temple. No, this is the Bible, not the historical temple. If you think that, you're making the same mistake the Jews did when Jesus said, destroy this temple and I'll raise it up in 3 days. And they said, what? This temple took 46 years to build, and will you destroy it and raise it up in 3 days? And they even charged him at his trial before the high priest, saying he had said that when he meant spiritually, the spiritual temple. And likewise, when we read the man of sin, Satan, taking his seat in the temple, it's not the literal temple in Jerusalem. It's not telling us that this happened or was fulfilled in the 1st century AD. And why would God bother to write it if it was fulfilled before we even got our hands on the Bible? No. Or in the New Testament side of the scriptures, he's writing for the New Testament era. He's writing to tell us about the end, just like Christ spoke of false prophets and false Christs in Matthew 24 to warn us the time of the end. The church will fall away. There will be an apostasy first, and that's what it says in 2 Thessalonians 2:3. There must be a falling away, an apostasy, before Christ comes, his second coming. And anyone looking to a literal physical temple, well, you're deceived. You're deceived. You don't know how to understand the Bible. It's apparently not been given you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but it has been given to God's people. We know Christ spoke in parables. Without a parable, he did not speak. And the temple represents the church. The temple represents the church. So, going back to Luke 1, verse 20, where is Zacharias? He's in the temple. He's in the temple. What's he doing there? Well, he's fulfilling his course. He was of the line of the priests, and he was of the course of Abia, which was the 4th course, and that 4th course would take place for a whole month, and then he would go home. He would go home, and his lot was to burn incense in the temple, and so he was busy carrying out his task of burning incense at the time of prayer. And by the way, God ties together incense and prayer in Revelation 8, significantly enough. Revelation chapter 8, we read in verse 3, and another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer, and there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all saints upon the golden altar, which was before the throne. Zacharias offering incense is really representing the prayers of all saints. And the prayer is answered. Zechariah, Yah has remembered. Yah has remembered his oath, God of the oath. And here is the forerunner. Here is John the Baptist to prepare the way of the Lord, because God is faithful to his covenant. He's faithful to his promises. He will fulfill them. His word is true and faithful. And also notice in Revelation 8, I shouldn't have let it drop, but I did. Revelation 8, verse 1. And when he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. Now, we learned a long time ago that God, the way he revealed the Great Tribulation, it's likened to an hour. It is the last hour in the day of salvation. And the day of salvation is a work day. The people of God were to get to work, getting the gospel out. And in the parable of Matthew 20, there are workers going into the vineyard, and they work 12 hours, and they're working all day. They're hired at 3-hour intervals until the 11th hour. Then the owner of the householder of the vineyard, he does something different, and he changes his way of hiring, and he gets another group that have been idle all the day and gets them to go to work for 1 hour, 11th to 12th. And what we find is the hours from, and the work day is 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. So from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m., the 11-hour normal work day, that points to church age. Then off script and something different. Who are these? They're idle. They weren't in the churches. They weren't in the congregations. God's going to use his people, these ones that weren't the pastors and elders and deacons. He's going to use them, these individual believers, to get the gospel out for that last hour. And that hour is the Great Tribulation. And it's also known as judgment beginning at the house of God. And it's 2 parts. It's 2 parts. And Revelation 8, verse 1 is telling us about the first part of that hour of judgment on the churches. And the first part, there's silence in heaven for about the space of half an hour. So it's not an even split. It's not an exact half hour, about a half hour. And when we look at what God did, putting all the various information together, we see that the church age ended May 21, 1988, and then there was a grievous period of famine wherein virtually no one was saved anywhere in the world, and absolutely no one was saved within any church for 2,300 evening mornings. And that's a space of time, 6 years and about 4 months. And that was the first part. That's the about half hour of silence. It's also the time when the 2 witnesses are said to be killed for and lying dead in the street for 3.5 days. You read about that in Revelation 11, verses 7 and after. But notice silence in heaven, silence in heaven. The temple of God is referred to at least a couple of times as the temple of heaven in Revelation Revelation 11, verse 19, and the temple of God was open in heaven. And there was seen in his temple the ark of his testament, and there were lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail. And over in Revelation 16, we find, let's see, I'm pretty sure it's here. Yes, it's in verse 17, and the seventh angel poured out his vial into the air, and there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne saying, "It is done." Now, there's a heavenly temple and an earthly temple, just like there's a heavenly Jerusalem, earthly Jerusalem, and so forth. But here, the silence that John is experiencing, John is struck dumb. The emphasis, unable to speak, speechless. This silence is pointing to that initial 2,300-day period, and where there's silence in heaven, meaning there's no joy in heaven. There's joy over one sinner that repents, but there's no salvation taking place. And then notice in verse 21, and the people waited for Zacharias and marveled that he tarried so long in the temple. Now, when we get together our next study, we're going to look at the word waited and tarried so long. Tarried so long is actually a translation of one Greek word. And we'll see how those words direct our attention to the second coming of Christ and to the end of the world, to which the 5 months reference here has to do with. Now, I know you probably are thinking, well, Luke chapter 1, even McCann has to start speaking of Christmas things and getting, we're all in the Christmas spirit. It's that time of year. Well, I didn't write the Bible. I didn't put these words. You'll see with tarried so long, it's only used 5 times. And you'll be amazed that the other 4 places, the other 4 times, the way in which it's used. And I didn't place 5 months reference here. God did. And so, no matter the time of year, when we do Bible study, we follow where the Bible leads us. So I hope you'll follow along with me when we get together in our next eBible Fellowship Bible study.
You've been listening to eBible Fellowship's Evening Bible Studies with your host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann. For more studies and information, visit ebiblefellowship.org. Until next time, may the Lord's perfect will be done.